Kashia? Sister Kashia, sorry. You know, I was gonna get my whole Cisco and Ebert thing on, and I'm seeing now that it is backwards. Does it look backwards to you? Thanks. Good. You can hear me. I see there's other people in the chat joining us. It is backwards. Yeah. Well, it'll probably go off soon. It's like annoying. Okay, good. I see. And most of them will reverse it. Okay, great. And people are coming in. There's people. Peace. I'll give it a few more seconds and then we will. Peace, Sister Sequoia. I know that our new members knew that I was doing this, but for anyone who is coming from the World Wide Web, surprise, substitute teacher. So, and hopefully I'm going to do Brother Lowe some justice in going over this film and doing it live. So, unfortunately, we have a backward. I was going to get my Siskel and Ebert on, but instead it's just going to be Sully and everybody else. So, there we go. So, it'll probably cut off or not. Okay. All right. So we have about 9. So I'm going to go and get started because it's like 9:02. So this evening we are breaking down the film Daughters of the Dust. And I'll say one thing about this film. I was introduced to it about a year ago, I want to say. And prior to that, I was diehard. Peace, Brother Antonio. I was diehard Color Purple, one of those people. And I have to say, like, this film is more accurate than The Color Purple. And it has more history in it than The Color Purple. I got a chance to speak with Brother Lowe this afternoon, and he referred to it as the Helios Biblios for Black people. And just because of some of the correlations in the film and the things that you can see in the film, which we'll go over, and I am very nervous. So if I do forget, for those of you who have seen the film and are in the chat, please feel free to, add in, whatever I've missed, and I'll try to, remember to get right, especially considering The Color Purple is disrespectful. Please, I'm gonna just so I can see everything. Okay. So again, apologies for the backward. So hopefully when this uploads, it will give us the right side round. So when I watched this film, the theme that I was watching it underneath was the theme of advancement. And it's appropriate because when you think of Daughters of the Dust, it's a movie about the Geechee Gullah or Gullah Geechee people, or the Geechee or the Gullah. There's a lot of those two words in terms are used interchangeably about this particular family who are culturally Geechee Gullah, and they're moving from the Igbo landing, which is where the film takes place, to the mainland. So they're moving north, and so the year is 1902. And so this is like, you see the first wave of the Great Migration, and former enslaved people moving from the south to the north. And I say like the first wave, Brother Lowe and I had a chance to discuss that a little bit, because we know that the Great Migration lasted for some time. I myself, my mother is a product of the Great Migration. So she came here when she was like in the 50s, I believe, 50s. So it lasted all the way up until the 70s. So, you know, and I think Brother Lo went over this two strongs ago when he, you know, kind of previewed some of the film. So that's what Daughters of the Dust kind of prefaces. And if you're not familiar with Geechee Gullah, and I even had to kind of do some research and kind of refresh myself before we did this live. They are people who are descendants of West African slaves. Like Geechee Gullah is like what it was considered like the low country, so it's more geographically low country, so like in the south. And their ethno-cultural group. And you can see that in the film that they retain a lot of their tradition and history and pass that on through family. So when I think about, as I said, you know, when I watched this film, the theme that I was looking at under was advancement. And so when I think about advancement, you know, it's the process of promoting a cause or a plan. We can also think of it as development or improvement. So there are a lot of correlations to a lot of different Anu readings and teachings, especially like 14 keys, solutions, and now we have the Anu way. So let's get into it. And like I said, I'm really nervous, so bear with me. And as Chief says, like, let's just go for the ride. So like I said, like, so the location is Igbo Landing. And these are the Geechee Gullah people. And maybe you might think when you hear Geechee Gullah, I know I did, I thought the Carolinas, particularly South Carolina. But really, Igbo Landing is actually in Georgia. And now Geechee Gullah is the Gullah people are largely considered like the South Carolina, because the Geechee Gullahs kind of run from the South Carolina coast, those islands, down to the islands like in Georgia. And the Geechee people are from Georgia, but I am neither one, so I would not be able to say how accurate that is, but some research says that that's how the people are classified now. So the film opens. It does give like a preface of what's happening. So we have this family, the Pazant family, and this entire film, it is chronicling the day that they leave, or the day before they leave the island, they leave Igbo Landing to travel north. Peace, Bubba Cruz. I think I'm missing some of the people, so if I did not see you, peace, peace, peace. So they're leaving Igbo Landing to go north. And so we are introduced, open scene on the river. And mind you, it opens on the water, so that is very significant when we think about women and receptivity and being fluid. It opens on the water and on the river, and we're introduced to Viola. So Viola is a cousin or a family member who's returning home. She is accompanied by another melanated man, Mr. Sneed, and she has commissioned him to take photos of the family on the eve of their departure to the mainland. When they are at the boat, another family member, it turns out another family member has also decided to return at the same time. That other family member, her name in the film is Yellow Mary. So, her name is Mary, but they call her Yellow Mary. And they call her Yellow Mary just because relative to the complexion of the family and maybe some other Yellow Mary, the individuals on the island, she is lighter skinned, but like when you look, and Viola actually says this, she's not as light skinned as you would see on the mainland. And that is you can even see that from the woman who she's with, who we later find out, I think we had to like look it up or something. Her name is Trula, because Trula has no lines in this whole film. And initially when I started watching it, I thought she was Yellow Mary because she was wearing yellow and she was lighter skinned. So, but we find out that Trula's, her main role is like to be a witness to what's happening. So getting back to it. So both Viola and Yellow Mary are returning from the outside world, and they're returning with different experiences. Um, Viola, she goes out and invests in like European, American culture or Western culture, which is celebrated on the mainland because that is what has been established. So she's neglected her own heritage and legacy to embrace Western religion because she comes back evangelizing from whatever she picked up on the mainland. Because this is what where she has received. This is probably where she's received validation from Western culture, which is, in the church, it seems like. So as they're sitting on the boat, you also get the sense immediately that there is some resentment to Yellow Mary. I'm going to try to make sure I say it properly. Yellow Mary, as well as meaning her complexion, right? There's some resentment toward Yellow Mary for being able to move differently, probably because of her complexion, as a lighter skinned woman. And you also, you as the film goes on, you get to see Yellow Mary as an Oshun type energy, or you could even say Mary Magdalene, but we'll get into that later. So Viola makes sure to tell Mr. Sneed, well, she's not that light skinned. So clearly, there's already some issue with Yellow Mary and Viola. And throughout this entire experience, as they're taking this ferry boat to Igbo Landing, Yellow Mary barely says a word. She just giggles. So you can tell that she's really, in a sense, unmoved by Viola's like posturing, how she's kind of made it in the big big bad world. She's like, yeah, whatever. Um, so and the other thing is because Viola kind of views Yellow Mary as a waste of light skin, and you hear that again from the family members when they make it to Igbo Landing and they kind of go up onto the beach. So that's where we see like Viola has been shown by Western culture that lighter skin has value. So she fully you could maybe get the sense that she fully invests as an evangelist because she had to kind of find her niche. She has to find out what's where she can make it and where's good for her. Yellow Mary, now we can move to Yellow Mary. She has a different experience because I won't say because she has somewhat of a different experience. So as Brother Lowe and I were talking, I was like, I got the sense that she was a prostitute. Brother Lowe said it much nicer than I did. She was probably a sporty woman. Now I'm talking about, so that was from him. So we know she worked at a brothel. She probably had a madam as a boss, or maybe she was a madam. Who knows? But she clearly was about that life. But as we hear her when she's speaking to Nana Pazant, we hear her say, she heard the drums calling and she didn't know they were talking about her. So, she clearly was, pulled back home, and probably because she was in need of healing, or, she needed to repent, or, there was some sort of redemption that was needed by returning home. So they, as they're on the boat, I'm to skip around because my notes, I realized after the fact, we're kind of all over the place. But there's this moment on the boat, and you can kind of get a sense of the kind of the mindset of Viola and Mr. Sneed, because while they're on the boat, Mr. Sneed has this kaleidoscope. And you see if you know what a kaleidoscope is, you kind of look down and it's all these different colors, and you can, make it out of whatever you want. The vision can be a photo, it can be beads, whatever. And you kind of, and it's this two-part thing where I'm not going to do that with my hands anymore. It's this two-part thing where you twist it and it makes all these different little geometrical visions and things like that. So, Mr. Sneed, he goes into this whole explanation as Yellow Mary is kind of looking at the kaleidoscope, and he's explaining yeah, it's a kaleidoscope. It's a Greek word. He's basically very proud of his education that he received on the mainland. And and then in speaking with Brother Lowe, like, we learn, we can probably pull from that, like, this is the beginning of the HBCUs and like colleges being established. And so he's probably, coming back from going to a school and, feeling kind of very proud of himself. And we see that he kind of has like I would say a bias maybe toward the Pazant family, because at one point he kind of says to himself, saltwater Negroes, kind of like backwater Gullah Geechee people. So he's, kind of, there's this slight, looking down. And you can tell like the way that he's explaining like what a kaleidoscope is. And he, you know, he he and Viola, they have an arrogance about them where, they're very proud of maybe of some of the knowledge, maybe some of it useless, that they have acquired on the mainland, and they're bringing it, they, feel like they're bringing it back to the Pazant family. Peace is to Akuya. And so, as I said, like he's explaining what a kaleidoscope is. And it's interesting because when you do think about, a kaleidoscope, it can be seen as like a symbol of a distorted truth, and so that's also symbolic of the programming that Viola and Mr. Sneed have most likely received while on the mainland, but they don't know they're programmed. And as we said, like HBCUs were being founded around this time, and we, it's 1902, so they didn't go to one of the other schools. So they came back and they thought they were the ish. That's what it is. So so they're still on the boat, and there's a lot happening. So they're on the boat, and then we're also at this time introduced to the Pazant family through through scenery and music and voiceovers from what the film describes, who the film describes as the unnamed child, and we'll get into that later, as well as the voice of Nana Pazant. And so there's this, you see them kind of getting up, preparing for the day. Peace, Brother Zach. The screen keeps freezing. It's not freezing on my end. Did anybody else just kind of give a yes and then? Oh, okay. Well, because she said it was just you. Sorry. Yeah, okay. All right. Sorry, Brother Zach, that you're experiencing that. But maybe we can get it on the playback. I'm not gonna engage. So we see them, getting up, preparing for the day, and you immediately hear, that there is going to be this idea of a pull. And in the beginning, at first I thought it was like, I wanted to say it was a push and a pull, but it's really a pull from two directions. There's the pull to remain on Igbo landing, because if they leave, they'll be leaving traditions behind. But at the same time, there is also this pulling from the mainland. And what we know of the Great Migration, a lot of people came north, or I guess in this case went to the mainland because there's the promise of jobs, or the promise of something new, or the promise of that better life. And what they didn't realize was where they were was the best place that they could possibly be, because we know we are actually living the present of what they thought they were going to be. We know that when they got there and settled in different places, they turned out to be horrible. And like I said, like a lot of us are living in those spaces now, where a lot of our ancestors migrated to, and not everybody had like the best experience. So we get the sense of that pulling to stay, and that pulling to leave, or to advance forward, or to evolve. So now we have, so we're back on the boat, as everybody's waking up and getting ready. We're back on the boat, and Viola's still like having this very pretentious conversation, one-sided conversation with Yellow Mary, and she's like reminiscing about an uncle because they passed by the house, and she's talking about an uncle that they had, and she's like, oh, you remember when he used to kind of speak those funny words in the African language, an uncle, I forget his name, Skype Naw, or something like that. And again, Yellow Mary's just looking at her like, yeah, whatever, I'm not engaging. And in her in Viola's one-sided conversation, you kind of hear that she really did go to the mainland and lose her essence. She lost a good part of herself, or maybe it was never there. When we in our new, we talk about spirit and truth, and and soul, I should say soul, and maybe it was never in Viola, since she forgot it so easily, and is happy to stay in the mindset that she has. So that's I guess something to think about. So now when they're still in the boat. So as she's not necessarily getting that conversation from Yellow Mary, she kind of goes back and forth between having the conversation with Yellow Mary and Mr. Sneed. And so at this one point, she starts to tell Mr. Sneed, explain how there in Igbo Landing, that the last slaves were brought over even later than the law, I guess, of the land had ended slavery. She tried to tell him that there were white slavers who were still bringing fresh Africans over from the continent, even after the government outlawed new slaves. And Mr. Sneed is like, oh, that can't be. He's defending the law as if to say like it was beyond reproach. He's defending the culture that he adopted, or at least wants to be part of, as his programmed mind thinks. So Massa said they outlawed it, so I believe him, and that wasn't really the truth. Chief says Viola had her experience. This is so like difficult to like read on the. Viola had her experience. She represented a different part of the solution. They all did. Even Sneed. He was technology, while Viola represented social agreement beyond the primitive island. Yes. Yes. So they're having this conversation. So, eventually they do make it to Igbo Landing. And but before they like actually pull up, we now cut to a scene where we're introduced to Nana Pazant, who is the matriarch of the family, and one of the men of the family, Eli. Eli is Nana Pazant's grandson. And they're in the cemetery because Nana Pazant is, at her husband's grave, paying respects to the ancestors and her husband's grave, and they're having this conversation. And she kind of understands that the family is not prepared. And excuse my eyes, I'm like looking at my notes. The family is not prepared for the migration north, as they've kind of been isolated for very long. And she also knows that they will readily forget their traditions in exchange for, the glamour of the mainland and the outside world. Nana Pazant is presented as having this foresight that other family members don't have. You could say that she's of a priestly order. This is Daughters of the Dust. So you do see a lot of representation in Nana Pazant. And another character that we'll get into later, Eli's wife, Eula, as being very perceptive and able to, give like a real hard and dirty like truth to people, because they can see what others don't. So, she's very connected, Nana Pazant. Peace, Sherelle. And so it's Nana Pazant who predicts that to Eli what his actions are actually going to be. that he's not going up north. Um, and because there's just too many scars that he has. Why does he have scars? So we find out that, you know, Eli's wife, Eula, has been raped by someone on the island. And the way that it's spoken about, you can kind of tell that the person who raped her was a non-melanated person. Um, Someone up the precious mom says, I also felt the backdrop was the cemetery because she was offering the juxtaposition between the move, the forthcoming baby, and the ancestral realm. Yes, she was. And then I'll get into that. These comments move so fast. I'm using an iPad. There were so many narratives. Sister Kashia says there were so many narratives of the black woman that was represented in this film. Older, younger, traditional versus new age, outspoken versus soft-spoken, mothers and daughters. Absolutely. We see that in Hagar, who we'll get into. She was very outspoken. But you know, she's speaking to Eli because Eli needs counseling because he is literally tormented and torn up about this because he doesn't know. But like I said, you know, because there is, you know, Eula doesn't really want to tell him because most likely it was one of the white men on the island. And if he goes to confront anybody that doesn't look like him, most likely he could end up hanging from a tree. So, yes, and Sister Kashia says the constant reminder of the children and the ancestors' relationships, how both require a level of care and reverence. Yes, and we do see in this film that there is definitely a reverence for children. There's this, you know, as we move forward through the day, there's this scene where we see one of the other elder women speaking with the children, and she's teaching them, you know, a language. I don't know if it's Igbo, but she's definitely teaching them a language that is possibly from one of the languages from the continent. And it's Eli was a blacksmith too. Yes, I'm gonna get into that. You know, she's teaching them, you know, the language, and it's seen. You can see that as a way to keep the traditions. And it's done in such a loving manner. And there's always this visual that they give you of the relationship between the young and the old, which is really beautiful to watch. So Nana Pazant, you know, she's basically trying to talk Eli off a ledge because he is just going through it. He don't know what happened. He's like so angry. You know, and Nana Pazant has to basically tell him, like, you know, this child, because now Eula's pregnant as not as a result of the rape, but she's pregnant, and so there's this hanging question, like, is it my baby? And it's really tormenting him, and so Nana Pazant is she's basically like seeing right there, like he's not going to be, she's charging him with being the leader of the family, but she also sees that he may not even be able to go because he just has so many scars that he's not letting go of. And he, you know, he's saying, you know, why did this happen to me? All these, you know, he talks about how they, you know, all them talking to the ancestors and talking to, you know, different deities, all the traditions and rituals that they do, and why did this still have to happen to him? Like, he's like literally going through it, and she's like, you know, she imparts to him that the womb and the ancestors are one, signifying that it's an ongoing cycle of birth, death, and rebirth within the family. So regardless of the physical father on earth, the ancestors chose to bring this child forth, which means really that the unnamed child, who is also serves as a narrator for this film at certain parts, so the unnamed child is part of their DNA. But Eli, he don't hear the message because he's, you know, he is stuck, he's caught in this emotional cycle. And so, you know, you cut to the scene where he goes, I guess he goes to his house, and Eula's there. She's kind of like looking out the window, and he's like, you know, he goes to her, and he's, you know, like, who did this? Who did this to us? And she's telling him that no good from come from knowing, because again, like most likely it was, one of the non-melanated people or lesser melanated people on the island. And again, if he confronts them, it can go all the way left. So there's this, there's and one of the brothers, you can please like chime in. There's probably this feeling stuck that he can't even feel like he can protect his woman, because if he reacts, this will happen. But again, he's still like very emotional about it, because there's this part where you kind of think like, because she won't tell him who it is, that he's gonna choke her out, and it's just like, whoa. He kind of goes, so he has to like just leave, so to blow off some steam. You realize that he must be, he has skills in like smelting, like a blacksmith. So immediately that Ogun energy is presented to us, as you see him, like he goes to his forge to kind of let off steam, and he's just like banging away at this like metal, this piece of metal that's been fired up. I don't know what he was making, but I don't even think that was the point. The point was to to see like where he goes to kind of move through his emotions. And so that will sound familiar to some of the sisters on the line from one of the calls that we had recently. So you kind of see like Eli's motivation for leaving is that he feels the old ways are not working. This is what he's like going off to Nana Pazant about. The precious mom says, it struck me when her pep talk reminded him that even in marriage, she isn't his property. Exactly. There was a clear energy of non-possessive love and acceptance. Exactly. And I was going to say, in that we find Eli has a very possessive love. It's a love of possession. He says he feels that his wife is no longer his. And Nana Pazant reminds him that she don't belong to you. She doesn't belong to you any more than you belong to her. So he's still unable to reconcile this. And you kind of see this all through the film, that he's literally tormented all throughout the day. And at one point you even hear the unnamed child say, like, it was kind of a struggle. She spent some time trying to convince, I was about to call him Ogun. She tries to convince Eli that he's her father. So I guess eventually he maybe accepts it, but throughout this film, it's just no deal. He's just really tormented by it. And so yeah, he goes to his forge to deal with his emotion and his rage of kind of being held, kind of like like he can't move. So kind of moving forward. Oh, and I did want to say, he goes through these. I did touch on this before, but like he goes through these stages of disbelief, like in his ranting and saying, like, why didn't this help us? Why didn't that help us? Like all these things we do, and this still happened to me. Like he's very like internal and in his own feelings, and he also starts to blame a lot of things, like like he blames, like he goes off. There's a tree that they have full of bottles, and it's based on some of their beliefs and the rituals that they practice, and he literally decimates the tree, smashes, it's glass everywhere, and he's going through this thing where it's just blaming everyone, and he doesn't see okay, well, what can I do to move through this? And I mean, eventually he'll have to get there, but we don't necessarily see that with Eli in that moment. So fast forward. So we have met Eula at this point, and you kind of get the sense that both Nana and Eula they're very similar energies. Like, so you could even say like they're that same priestly caste, the Iyami or the Wajet. And at different points in the film, both of them have to remind the family members about the scars, right? The scars that they all carry, from which they're running away from. Brother Zach says, as the saying goes, it's hard to see the forest through the trees. When you're in it, it's hard to see the bigger picture. Exactly. This is sometimes why we have to ask ourselves, like, what do we do when we're in our feelings? Why do I feel this way? You have to kind of work through that instead of, kind of sitting this blind rage. And that's even me talking to myself. So that, at different points in the film, they remind the family that there are many scars that they're running away from. Nana warns that they will need the guidance of the ancestors, and that they need the traditions to keep them anchored to keep them anchored to their people and who they are when they reach the mainland. Because, and she says, like, you're not going to no land of milk and honey. And then if you go back, if we think about Yella Mary and Viola, who have now, they're walking up, they're reaching the kind of where everybody's been kind of centered and kind of moving around on the beach. They neither one of them kind of returned and revealed the fullness of what the mainland holds, or maybe they revealed what it was for them because that's what they experienced. But reality, the family's not necessarily prepared for what's to come. So now I'm gonna move to Hagar, and Hagar is one of the women in the family. She is a mother. We find out that Hagar married into the family, and she has two daughters, Myona and Iona. And while the film doesn't necessarily center around them, something to take note of are their names. And it's important because, and we hear this through some of the narration, a lot of the characters get a piece of narration, right? My owner, and I own her, right? And it's important, and we hear through a narration that Viola gives later in the film when she's speaking to Mr. Sneed, the importance of the names and like why they named the names that. She says, like, it's been 50 years since slavery ended, and people here are still naming their children names like Myona and I own her, and Pete and Repeat and Pigeon, and she goes to list all these names, and as she lists the names, her voice becomes an echo, and the longer the list gets, the names start to become they start to become I don't know if it's correct to say more African, but she starts to go into Oya and Eshu and Elegba, and so you see that she's still there. She's still there. She's retained what she's learned a little bit, or where she came from, but she really prefers to keep her programmed self. But she is knowledgeable of where she came from. But it's interesting to talk about that because the names, it was kind of like, and specifically using the examples of like Myona and I own her, it's like a psychological warfare with the former enslavers. I need to learn these energies. Because it's like, melanated people who were enslaved had come through with that trauma of having their babies sold away from them, babies, mothers, fathers, sold away from them. So now we're in this space where it's like I can kind of like get back at Master and say I own her. It's kind of a way of saying like this one's mine. But again, it brings us back to that idea of possession and possessive kind of love, and that's never good for anyone. And there's a moment what we see why it's not good, because it's just going to end in pain for either one or both parties. Because Iona actually has like a little love affair. I don't think with one of the men on the island. It seems like they're around the same age, so but he's a man. one of the men on the island, he's Cherokee. So it also goes in to show, like, that there were people from First Nation in this area as well. And his name is Saint Julian Lashchild. And so a lot of what, when we're watching the film in the beginning, like on the boat, and like when we're introduced to the family, it's all the narration at that point is Iona reading a letter from Saint Julian Lashchild, and we see, like, there's like this kind of love affair between them, and he knows that the family is getting ready to leave, and in this letter he's begging her to stay. And so at the end of the film, we find out why that possessive love can be very damaging for people, because yeah, Iona does something that's just like, oh, really? We doing that? Okay. So fast forward, well, not fast forward, but like moving forward. Hagar, we're introduced to Hagar, and she's literally in the woods, and she is going off. She is like, and she's kind of having this very contentious conversation, I guess, with God. And she's like, I'm leaving, and she's just kind of swearing to God, like, I'm leaving, I'm out of here, and nobody better not hold me back, I'm out. And she's literally like she is the representation of a rebellious woman. She's just like, nobody's holding me back, I'm gonna do what I want, I'm getting out of here, I need to go. At the same time, and Brother Elo and I spoke about this, and I guess there might be like a difference of kind of how we view it. At the same time, the same way Mr. Sneed represents that technology, and Viola represents that move from the primitive to, and an evolution in that way. Hagar represents that advancement, because throughout the film, as she speaks, she's really talking about, like, we have to go, we have to leave, because there is some movement, like, even though staying there would keep them, it's probably better if they did stay, because we know what happens. We know what happens when a lot of melanated people migrated to the mainland. But there is a need to move forward. There is a need of advancement. And if we remember, the film is Daughters of the Dust, and we're talking about women and receptivity of women, and what else do women do? We do, that's the wisdom. And so in that, there is some wisdom of, there needs to be an evolution. The family cannot necessarily stay here and not evolve. Even though it may have been safer for them to stay there, there is a need for evolution, and that's what Hagar represents in that moment. But it doesn't take away from the fact that she absolutely was rebellious and very, she has this very I'm educated, and I could do this and I could do that, and I'm a mother of 5 kids, and I don't put this many in the grave, and she just goes off at the mouth and says what she wants, and doesn't think twice about it. Chief says they cast her perfectly. That scowl, yes, she has a perpetual scowl on her face. Even when she's smiling, it looks like a scowl. She's a tiny bit scary. So she's swearing that she doesn't want to come, and she doesn't want to come back. She's, the family is leaving for the promised land, and that's what they're leaving. She thinks that where they're going is the promised land. That is, was the mistake of a lot of people. But in reality, where they were, and this is a message from Brother Lowe, where they were was the promised land, and where they're going is actually the wilderness. And that's, Yellow Mary is like proof of that. So, and as I said, like, there's this, and as these things are going on, the film has like a lot of these cutaways that give you insight into how they move. Sister Sequoia says, in this movie, it reminded me of the huge sacrifice the original people made. Once we were emancipated, we chose to advance in America through music, culture, etc. in making this decision, and then it cuts off. I'm so sorry. I don't know, for some reason, like, it is just not letting me be great with the live chat. We decided to remain disconnected from our roots, never reclaiming or returning back to our original culture. Yeah, I would also say sometimes it comes back, it does come back around, and I guess I don't know if you would say that based on, when we think about the cycle of death and rebirth. So I would say it definitely comes back around as souls or ancestors reincarnate if and when they have to. So yeah, yes, I agree. Um, so yeah, there's like all these cutaways. There's a need for balance in the advancement of family evolution within forgetting the old ways, birth and death. Yes. So there's all these cutaways, and again, like I said, I mentioned it before. You see one of the other elder women, speaking with the children. Yeah, Sequoia Viola may have had certain memory, but how many generations could that last last without on the mainland? I think that's what you said. Yeah. So, um, so now finally, finally, Yellow Mary and Viola, they reach the beach where everyone is, and there's mixed emotions about the return of Yellow Mary. So when they get there, and it was actually Iona and Myona who saw them first, and they kind of like walked with them up to the beach where everybody was preparing food and whatnot to get ready to have a big dinner before they leave. And also I guess people knew that it seemed like they knew because everybody was well dressed, so it seems like they knew they were going to be taking pictures. So clearly, people were expecting Viola, but they weren't expecting Yellow Mary. So there was like this kind of mixed emotion. So people are like, screaming like, "Oh my God!" Families returning and they haven't really seen each other in a long time. So there's hugging and whatnot. And Yellow Mary comes in. Everybody's like, they literally they do this thing. Specifically the women, and some of the men were looking on, but again, this film mostly focuses on the women, even though it was very clear that there was a presence of the masculine principle. But they kind of band together, and it's like they do the, here she come, where she been? Oh, she been ruined. All that yellow skin been wasted. Like just nasty, which is probably why Yellow Mary was letting Viola have a conversation with herself on the boat. And truth be told, I probably would too, because she kind of knew what it was. And you find out when when she gets a chance to be with Nana Pazant on her own, you can't keep nothing a secret on this island. So things, different rumors or whatever have probably circled around, and but she's not really worried about the family. Like she's there for her own healing, and you see that when she is speaking with Nana Pazant. Nonetheless, she does try to make like a little bit of a peace offering. So even though Hagar, as a woman who married into the family, like she's kind of, it's kind of like, I don't know, they're like, I don't know, it's kind of like Mean Girls. So she's like the head of the Mean Girls when they decide to be mean, and so she gives Hagar a can of store-bought biscuits, and she's clear about it being store-bought, because I guess at that time, like if you had funds to get something store-bought, like, oh, it must be good. But Hagar is not impressed by it. And the truth is, like, I guess, like, should she be impressed? Like, these women have been living on the island. They cook everything from scratch. They know how to cook. So, store-bought biscuits are not necessarily gonna impress her. Sister Kashia says yellow nose ring was a sign of her worldly experience and unbraided hair through most of the film. So as we get into that. So, we see when Yellow Mary has a chance to sit with Nana Pazant, she tells her, Nana Pazant like didn't know she was coming. She's like, she kind of wanted to keep it a surprise, but it's really hard to keep things a secret on Ebo Landing. And she says, I heard the drums calling, but I didn't know they were calling me. But at some point, I guess she figured she had to come home. So Nana Pazant is like, right, security. She's speaking to her, and she's like looking over, how like a mother looks over a child when they haven't seen them in so long, and she's like, what's this on your neck, and what is this? And then even Yellow Mary has like symbols of religion from the outside world. I think it was like some sort of thing of Saint Christopher to bless travelers, whatever, whatever. And Nana Pazan is like, okay. So fast forward, Yellow Mary is next scene. Yellow Mary and Trula, the silent woman in the yellow, Trula are sitting in the tree, and Eula is kind of looking up at them, and she's amazed because she's never been off the island. So she's like, they know that she's probably been, that she's been traveling, and she's been around people who speak different languages. They must, I think they know that she had a stint in Cuba. And this is where we learn a little bit more about Yellow Mary when they're like sitting in the tree talking. Eula's like, how do you say water in Spanish? And she's kind of grilling her to bring her things from the outside world because it's fascinating. And so in this time when they're in the tree, they're having, all these conversations, and Yellow Mary has this moment where, she was confusing to me. Like, she has this moment where she calls Eula a backwater Geechee girl, Geechee Gullah girl, or she says something like that to her. And, but I'm like, but at the same time, you came back to that backwater Geechee Gullah town to get some healing. So she clearly also has she's got some fight within herself. Brother Antonio talked about trust, and trusting, like, within and without. So she's got those things where she's fighting her own demons inside, and that kind of comes through when she's in the tree and talking. And so in this tree, in this scene, and again, it's like a back and forth between what's happening here and what's happening on the other side of the beach. And in this scene, this is where Eula basically clearly they can see that she's carrying a child, and so Eula tells Yellow Mary, how it happened. And so you hear Yellow Mary say, and telling you, but I didn't see the names, I'm so sorry. So you hear Yellow Mary say, rape, the raping of colored women is as common as fish in the sea. And so right then and there, you understand that is because Yellow Mary was probably raped. And probably the same thing, a similar fashion that happened to Eula, in that it was a lesser melanated person. So it's hinted to when she tells you. So Yellow Mary starts to tell her story of her time in Cuba. So she talks about she starts off and she said, she had a baby. I think she said we had a baby, but the baby was born dead. So that she was with someone. It's not clear whether it was her husband or just the man maybe she left with, because the family does say like, oh, she was ruined. But at some point she did get pregnant and have a child, but the baby was born dead. So that means she did have milk. And so we know that in that time, during slavery and also after slavery, there's been wet nurses for a very long time. The idea of wet nursing was not invented with slavery. But we do know that melanated women were wet nurses a lot of times. And so she hooked up with this family, like she called them, I don't know. At some point, she said muckety muck. I think like rich muck. She has some words. Like their language is a big thing in this film. But you figure out that they were like some rich people in one of the islands in the area, and she hooks up with them, and she serves as like their wet nurse, because she needed money. So and at this point, it seems like she probably was still I guess a good girl or whatever. She was, this is before she was most likely in that life. And the family decides that they have to go to Cuba. So they went to Cuba. So she goes to Cuba with them because she's their wet nurse. But then when she wanted to leave, they didn't let her go. And it seems like they were the ones who kind of turned her out. Like she was almost like stuck with them. To the point where she said she had to fix it where she didn't have any more milk come in. She says, so she fixed it so, no more milk came in. She fixed that mailbox. So, so then they finally let her go. And of course, like, probably let her go in a fashion where there was no, severance pay or whatever. So, she does what she has to do to survive. But the way she tells the story, it seems like they were the ones who kind of put her in that situation, or created like that situation for these things to happen. But again, we don't know, so there's only so much like supposing we can do. Um, so yeah, and it's interesting. I think when we think about, they ruined her probably on purpose, probably. Um, when we think about like the wet nursing, it's interesting. I'm here. I move around a lot, like pre quarantine in New York City, and the idea of wet nursing. I mean, maybe I don't know if there's people still have au pairs and nannies and things like that. So no, she did it herself. She said she fixed the titty. She did say, I didn't want to say that. She did fix the titty. I was referring to, you know, maybe getting into the. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, she did it herself. But yeah. So that idea of like wet nursing. That idea of wet nursing. I didn't say it. That's why. Okay. I mean, if I say it really fast, I think it sounds the same way. But that idea of wet nursing is still very much and especially wet nursing by melanated women is still much alive. Like if at least I know in New York City, if you move around certain neighborhoods, all the nannies are melanated. So it's not something that necessarily died with an era. Coming from the island, I'm sure she knew what to do. Yeah, she got back, didn't she? Okay, so I think we're there. So as we see this tree scene, like I said, there's a lot of cutting back and forth. So now I'm gonna go to like the women. So that the group of women are sitting on the beach, and Hagar is running her mouth. She is going off about, well, if Nana Pazant wants to stay, let her stay. And basically, like she's the old and we going toward the new. I'll lock horns with anyone who gets in my way. She is just there with it. And this moment is where it was Viola who actually had to remind Hagar, like, well, you married into this family, so don't be here dictating on what we should do and having all these real high and mighty opinions on, how our family should move. And Hagar, like, comes back at her and it's just like, well, this is, it's kind of like, well, this is my opinion. This is what I think. This is how I feel, and, deal with it. But it's not like this contentious fight. Like I thought that was really smooth how Viola was like, you married. Viola is very calm. She not until the end do you see her kind of lose it a little bit, but she's very calm throughout this entire thing. And she doesn't get up and like, well, you married into this family, you're not really one of us. No, she's like, well, you married into this family. Like very, very smooth about it. And Hagar is like, scout, I don't care. Like, this is what it is. And it's just going back to how, like, very rebellious. And this is the part where she's like, I'm educated and I do this. And so it's very reminiscent of, I got my own, I could do my own, I could do this for myself and da-da-da-da. So, yeah. This is where they have these conversations about, the conversation then moves on to another resident of the island, Bilal. No, Bilal is Muslim. And it's Viola, not Viola. I can't remember which one of them says it, but they kind of all agree. They think that Bilal is a heathen because he makes a lot, and he calls when he calls the Ethan when he's about to pray. And he's praying to these stars and the moon and it's unfamiliar to them, so in their minds it's wrong. And also in some instances, in their same wanting to move away from the island and move away from the traditions, they also want to move away from Nana Pazant and like her rituals and traditions, because you do see her, Hagar talks about like the she practices hoodoo. This is what it is. And it's like, this is not working for us. We need to go, we need to go to the mainland and evolve, and we need to do these things. We have to leave this old way of doing stuff behind so we can be better. So and yes, like evolution is necessary, and and definitely as them being women and wanting to do and move and be that energy in motion, there is a balance that they have to get. And Nana Pazant was very aware of that, where a lot of them weren't necessarily aware of how to strike or achieve that balance before they go. So like I said, like while this movie is focused on the women, the presence of the men is definitely made known. So remember, Mr. Sneed is there to take photographs and basically document their exodus from the island. And I thought it was interesting, like with all, whatever I thought about Viola, that was foresight to document that process, because even now, like, when we look back on photographs of different eras of our ancestors or lineage, someone had to have the foresight, like, oh, let's document this, let's take a photo. So I will say that was a really, really good idea. Where am I? So yeah, so the presence of the men is very known. We see, like, the way that we're introduced to Eli, we see that Eli has like, there's a closeness that the men have that they show that is really, really nice to watch. How they commune with one another and speak with one another. At this point, like right before Mr. Sneed goes to take the picture, take a photo, there's two instances where he's taking a photo or prepping to take photos of the men. And when he first arrives to the part of the beach where they're at, I don't know exactly what they're doing, but it doesn't look like a game, but maybe it is, but it looks like, I don't know, he's sand scrying or something, because Mr. Sneeze says like, oh, I see that you keep the old traditions. And they're saying, yeah, this is what we do, but they're, kind of huddled around. There's another instance where you see him about to take the picture, and he gets them together, and the unnamed child, she's not just a voice, but the unnamed child also, you see her materialize in some places, and she kind of runs around the wooded areas and the beach, and in this one instance when Mr. Sneed is taking the picture, she gets in the picture and she stands next to her father. So like it was just really a really nice visual to see, and not to mention not just the presence of the men, but in several instances there are scenes where they show you the relationship between the men and the women. So in the beginning scenes, you see a woman standing by a tree, and when her, I guess her paramour comes up behind her, that you see like their loving interaction. While Eula is listening to Yellow Mary in the tree and talk about different things, she has like this reverie, and she thinks about I think it's a time where she was, I guess she and Eli were, maybe they were courting or whatever. So you see this interplay between man and woman and male and female that is, really nice, which is a very nice change from the contention that we see in a lot of movies, like, girl, you don't need him, and da-da-da-da. There's none of that in this film, and it's really, really beautiful to watch. If you're paying attention, you can, you catch these scenes. So back to like the men. There's also a scene with Eli, the relationship that he has. I guess this is a cousin, and they start to wrestle, and it's another thing that's really powerful to watch, because there's this relationship that the men have with one another, where it doesn't put you in this space where it's like, what am I watching here? Like, exactly. I'm trying to be like mindful about my words. There's no question about what you're watching, because that's just not the where the film is going. It's showing, loving relationships between men and women, men that are not confusing, I should say, or where nobody's confused about what it is they are in that department. Um, okay, so now going toward dinner time, and there's some elements that I'll come back and like weave in. So going toward dinner time, so we see who must be the patriarch of the family. So again, the presence of the men is definitely made known, and he's honoring the ancestors before they start to eat, or before they break bread. And at one point he has a turtle shell that has like a cross, or an X, depending on the way you look at it, and it's not I think like the what would be the veve of Eshu, but that was what I thought of when I saw the cross, because they are kind of at a crossroads of sorts, because there's the idea of like staying where they are or leaving. Yes, most of the family is definitely leaving, but I do see that as like coming to where they have to kind of make a decision, like go this way or are we going to step back that way. Nana, and as they're having this preparation for dinner, it flows between the prayer, and then you hear Nana's voice come in, and she's talking about the importance of keeping family records and having the griots, because they need to be able to recall marriages and sales. And so when we think about like we can take that back to like the idea of the names Iona and Myona, and kind of how like these different how certain mentalities were, I don't want to say bred, but how they kind of came about. So also when Nana is talking about like the marriages and the sales, like she says like they would be sold, babies would be sold, and then have to come back and maybe mate with their own mother. And immediately I thought of a reference to Mandingo and Return to Uncle Tom's Cabin. So if you have not seen those films, those are pretty good films to watch to edify yourself a little bit more. And I watched those movies, all those kind of like in the same time where I watched Daughters of the Dust. So now they're getting ready to depart. So as I said before, Nana's job is to make sure that the family don't forget who they are and forget their ways and traditions. So even though they're going to the mainland, there has to be something that anchors them to their legacy. So she insists that they kind of complete this rite of passage. So the kissing of her hand, like before, they're also washing her feet as she's preparing these. She's like stitching up these. I don't know whether they're not dolls, but she's stitching up these things for them to take with them. These I'm not sure what to call them. If anybody knows, please put it in the chat. Let me see, because I think the chat is probably like on fire, and I'm probably missing it. Yes, it is. No, the Chi-Chi boy. Right, no Chi-Chi. Okay. Yes, I think I have been missing the chat. So now I know. Don't do these on the iPad, because the iPad will not let you see your comments. It's just like, do the video and get off. Nefertari says the movie is good, but the book still haunts me almost 20 years after reading it. There were parts in the book that made me cry hard heaves. Sister Sequoia says the book seems to always be better. Yeah, that's true. Books are always better than the movie. Brother Antonio says books have more time to expound on certain details in the movie. Yeah, because people are trying to like take a book that may have taken like you time to read, and you can actually process and think of your own what things look like in your head, and somebody has to kind of sum it up in an hour and a half to 2 hours and be like, all right, we're done, go home. So yeah, the books tend to be better, because also we can process in our own minds like how something may have happened, and sometimes our own imagination is way better than looking at someone else's interpretation. Peace, Brother Lowe. Yes, and please, Brother Lowe is in the building, so please feel free to like chime in where I may have left some things out. So right now I'm talking about the departure. So Yeah, so they're going through this rite of passage where before passing over the water, maybe to never return. Yes, Yellow Mary did return and Viola did return, to visit, but, we know a lot of instances where people like went up north and then they forget who they are, and then it's like they don't even know who their people are. Like I said, my mom was part of that, some of the later years of the Great Migration, and she gets upset when I'm just like, I don't necessarily want to go to South Carolina. She said, well, how are you going to know who your people are? So, maybe some people never did return. And, as people make their lives in different areas, and then, you have generations upon generations, you lose your people. So as this is going on, this really sparks a visceral and emotional reactions from both Viola, who we already know has left her traditions because she comes to eulogize, and Hagar, who's prepping to leave her traditions. And as I said, like Brother Lo and I were able to check in earlier today, and he says, it's like the Last Supper. Nana is saying, take a piece of my body. Chief says, don't you know what that was? I'm not gonna. Okay. Right. Okay. So Brother Antonio says, like, Hagar swore not to come back. Yes, she did, and she said she would lock horns with anybody who tried to stop her. So who wants to deal with that? So as Nana's sewing up this thing, you see she's talking about, she shows them like what she's putting in it, and in one of them she says, this is a lock of my mother's hair before she was sold. Oh, the wanga was the cloth she was tying up. It's called a wanga, but that type is specific. Okay. So she's, I guess, yeah, she's sewing up the wanga, and she puts in it a piece of her mother's hair, and she says it was given to her before her mother was sold off. And so immediately you see it's not just like, mindless rituals. Like, these are things that they have value. Like, this is, let's be clear. Nana Pazant is like one of the last, like, she was a slave. She experienced slavery. And while, some of the younger generations that we're seeing on the island did not, yes, they are in a time where there's Jim Crow, but they're also isolated on this island. So Nana Pazant definitely understands the need to keep traditions and stay connected, because she's seen and experienced people being sold off, or new, and families being new, meaning like fresh from the continent, and families being split up. So she puts in it a lock of her mother's hair because now her mother is an ancestor now. And she also combines it with a lock of her own hair. And she basically tells them, this is, like an anchor. This is going to keep you, tethered, when you leave and go north, is going to keep you tethered to me here. You know, yes, it remains a connection. So, as I said, it sparked like a really visceral reaction from Viola, who's like, this is a hoodoo, and it's she's like, basically it's blasphemous, it's against God, and she's really adamant about it. Like, this is something that she has dropped, and she at one point, she's sitting in this circle with children, and not children, but she does sit in a circle with children, but she's sitting with some other women, and they ask her, like, what happened on the island. She's like, I found Jesus. Jesus is the savior. Like, she's there with it. And so that's what her life is now. And so she definitely, whenever she gets the chance, she evangelizes. Brother Antonio says she was having Bible study on the beach, right? So there is this almost this reverence for both ancestors and children, and she does say, like, they're cherished, and we know, like, children are the stars. Like, children are they are thinking of Whitney Houston song. They're revered. They sit close to the ancestors as they're new. They're newer. And I will say, like, even though she's like basically having this conversation or teaching the kids, like almost like converting them, like it's kind of like she was giving them medicine. Nah, I won't say that. Like it was like bittersweet tonic, I guess, like at the same time. And there's this moment where one of the kids is being a kid and she's like making noise on this little kazoo thing and blowing bubbles out of it. And Viola turns to her and lovingly she's like, stop that. And this is what I mean about like Viola, like the way that she delivers a message, it's very sweet. And she speaks, it's almost as I remember in one of Chief's segments, you talk to God the way you would talk to your mate. And even though this is not a mate, like the way that she speaks to everyone, aside from when she went off, is so respectful. So even though, she kind of is like in this space where she does not want to, I guess, identify with what she came from, she still approaches people with like respect and love. I just saw a comment. Sister Sequoia says, I was a bit conflicted on the film. Keeping the traditions are important, but so is advancement. I wondered while watching the film if there can be a balance of the two. And that's what I was saying before. I think that's what Nana Fazant was saying, like, you think you're going here, but that's not what it's going to be. And maybe that could be because they weren't necessarily ready, So, and I don't know for them, like, what that balance, like, looks like. Sister Kashia says, so the Wangas, I've never heard of their name, but I know of them as Gris, Glee. I don't know if it's French or Creole. To put essences of self and the other things for protection to the wearer. And Chief says, yes, Gree can be many things, though. Some use bags to hold them up. Even the way you do candle can be a Gree. That's Nola Voodoo style. The Igbo style is different. On the Bible bound, that way gives power to the reader. It is said to empower. Chief says there is a balance. That's why you aren't supposed to pick one. They're all necessary. It's moving forward while keeping a tie. Thank you for that. Give thanks. Okay. So one of the last scenes, like before they leave, is Eula has like I guess you could call it a soliloquy because like nobody else is talking, but it's almost like a rant. Sister Nefertari says, if I recall properly, was that the same scene where the little girls were dancing while in the background there was an Oshun? I don't know which one you were talking about because there might even be a delay. But yes, there was a song. This is like after the women were talking. This is so okay. That happened after I believe Hagar went on her kind of like, I'll lock horns with anybody, da, da, da. And then one of the older women says, oh, I think it's about to rain. And then the wind picks up. But one thing that was really prevalent in this movie was the wind. And what do we know about the wind? That is a correlation to Oya and like change. And the idea of change, and as we said, like advancement. They are leaving one life to go build another, and so each time, they speak of like a transition. That wind kicks up, and it's very, very powerful. And then right after that scene, you hear there's a song playing. I actually went to go find the song. I found it and then I lost it. There's a song playing, which I thought was interesting because it was a lot of wind, but the song that they chose to play was an Oshun song called Iya Mi Ile. And so that's the song that they are singing. And the song Iya Mi Ile, like the translation, they're saying, give me a second, I'm sorry. Oh, of course I had it, and as soon as I take my finger off of it, I lost it. Okay, so they're saying Iya Mi Ile Odo, Iya Mi Ile Odo. My mother's house is the river. My mother's house is the river. Bogibo a she, obini sale ma'awo e. All powerful. She protects women in danger. Iyami ile odo. My mother's house is the river. And then it goes on to repeat. I saw something in the chat. Brother Antonio says their advancement was still founded on assimilation. So if the culture they were hoping to join didn't respect the culture they transitioned from, then they would put themselves in a position where at best they would have to hide their history, and at worst they would have to abandon or even revile their old customs. Yes, and we see that in Viola. Exactly. So one of the last scenes that really stands out is kind of Eula going off on everybody, and this is where you see that she's kind of like Nana Pazan's successor. She has that energy to like really scream on them like this is what it's gonna be, you know. And this is where you kind of realize like she and Eli are staying on the island, and you also kind of gather that from the narration of the unnamed child as she talks about like her experience with her great grandmother, which is Nana Pazan, and how she had to convince her father, I'm her child, I'm your child, and some of the experiences that she had on the island. So from that you kind of gather where Eula and Eli stayed. So Eula reminds the family, that even though you're going to the mainland, don't think you won't be burned. And she also reminds everybody of the scars that they keep. You know, Brother Lowe earlier said it was the drop the mic speech. She yeah, that's why I said, like, I don't know if I want to say it's a soliloquy. She was like Big Willie turning over tables, and everybody was literally like jaw dropped, like, what? Like, so, she had to like go off on everybody a little bit. They still left, but they didn't leave without her giving them a little piece of her mind. And then and also one of the last scenes is Bilal, where Mr. Sneed does finally get a chance to have a conversation with Bilal and talk with him about his experience. And then we find out that Bilal, what I thought was, Bilal doesn't necessarily get a lot of screen time, but I think the importance of Bilal, who is the one they call the heathen, and him being Muslim, you see how he is different from everyone. And so when we, and on Sabbath Cipher, we learn about, how the Negro got here, and how, we have to be mindful of like who we call our people and my people and their people. Bilal clearly says like he came over with the Igbo. He didn't say, oh, we came over. He made it clear that he was on the boat with them, but he was not one of them. They are not the same people. And I thought that was really interesting. And so they were all melanated, but they were definitely different people. And so that was like one of my biggest takeaways with Bilal and that experience. So that's pretty much the film. And so some of the things that were, standout things that I want to just like go back over is like, and which kind of talked about was the wind. The wind, definitely was another character in this movie or in this film to signify, the change and all of the evolution and the advancement that was taking place. Hagar was definitely that spirit of change because that wind kicked up. One of the first times the wind kicked up is when, not the first time, but just one of the early times is when she's having that moment in the woods. It's like, yeah, this is what we're doing. Brother, oh my goodness, there's so much chatter. She says the thing to remember is that they were in tune with the reality they built the civilization to advance into. It wasn't necessarily leaving their originality, but connecting with achieved originals. And then because she says, I really enjoyed this movie. Brother Lo says, I think Bilal made himself his own Quran by his own memory. That makes me think of the book of Eli. Speaking of an Eli, wind is changed. Okay, so yeah, the wind. Hagar is like that spirit of change and advancement. Like, you know, when the wind is blowing in the woods, when she's making that proclamation, like, I'm not staying here and keeping these, you know. And she's promising the spirits that she's definitely going to leave, and she cares nothing for the ancestors or tradition. It also blows on the beaches. They're like preparing for the photo. You know, the blankets are like all blown away. And I thought that was like symbolizing them, the move on the eve of change. It literally is on the eve of when they, you know, take their leave of the island and, you know, leaving the old behind for what they think is the new. And we did talk about this a little bit, so but the names, I just kind of want to go back to the names. So there was this point. So remember I said Hagar's daughters were Myona and Iona. And if you remember, I talked about how Iona had like a little, you know, teenage thing, I guess, with one of the, you know, other men on the island, St. Julian Lashchild. And right before that ferry pulled off from that dock, Iona said, later for this, I'm going to go be with Julian. And as Hagar is watching her daughter like leave, that's where you can even hear she's screaming Iona's name, and she says, I own her. Like, and that's how it sounds when it's coming out. So if you did not catch the, you know, in all the film and the talk about the names, it definitely comes out in the very end where she's literally screaming for her daughter to come back. And so not only do Eli and Eula stay on the island, but Iona stays as well. Yellow Mary, she had already been out there. She had already seen what's what. She done had her experiences. So she doesn't leave with them. We don't know if maybe she leaves after. We don't know if she's just there for a visit or she decides to stay. But we do know that when the film ends, not everybody left. So there definitely remains a tethering to the island. Sister Sequoia says, to achieve a state of balance, all parts in any given order must receive their precise portion of energy, so that none are wanting or stockpiling excess energy units. And that is directly from the 14 keys. Yes. Yellow Mary stays. Yes. Sister Kashia says names like that exist because Black women didn't own themselves. Yes, exactly. And one thing I wanted to say, like when Nana Pazant was when she, you know, was creating that rite of passage for them, she's like, yeah, y'all gonna do this before you leave. It also, you know, took me back to the 14 keys. Without ritual, there can be no community. So, and if you know, like all the women were crowded around her and they were doing that together. You know, and so in that they were, you know, creating this energy and synergy amongst them. So that is, I think, all my notes that I have. And I want to take questions. I think what I will do, I don't know if there's questions, but what I will do is I'll see if I can grab questions using the laptop, and then I can kind of see what everybody's saying in real time, because I can't see on this iPad what's happening. So if there are any questions, so that's what I have. I hope I did it justice for everybody. I don't see anything extra in the chat. I hope I did it justice, and I hope I did Brother Low justice, even with the substitute. I was a substitute teacher for now. So yeah, so I guess I can take questions, but I don't see. Give thanks, Chief, because I was so nervous and I still am. But give thanks. So I'll wait for questions from people. Um, oh, give thanks, everyone. Okay, so okay, I got through something. Walking that fear, right? Oh goodness. Okay. I don't see there was the okay. You swept in the spirit. This was such a comprehensive breakdown. I would didn't say, oh really? Because like my heart's about to come out through my mouth. There was a scene where Viola was swept in the spirit. I'm trying to remember which. Oh, was I think that's when she literally like she had that visceral reaction. Like she is that what you're talking about? Also the fact that some did choose to stay behind. Some did choose to stay behind while you see the intermingling with the First Nation population, right? So there are some things. I got Indian in my family. That's what they're able to do, and now I'm talking about that was for you, brother love. um, Also the indigo. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. And I did not get into that. I so skipped that. That was in my nervousness. So one of the things that's really um um key, it's portrayed in the movie is the indigo. So in the islands, a lot of the crops that the enslaved Africans were brought there for was for the indigo dyeing or indigo making, and you see that when there's a man when he's stacking the he's going to Eena, Meena, and immediately you think of Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo. And they actually do segue to that scene where they're going through the catalog and they're doing the wishing. I wish that was mine. And it's interesting. I'm probably showing my age here, but I don't know if I don't know who on the call, who on the live has played that game. Like that's my card. Those things like really did follow us throughout generations. And I still go through catalogs. They still do have catalogs. And I go through the IKEA catalog and I'm like, oh, that's a nice kitchen. Oh, that's a nice bedroom set. We still do those things. How close were they from being? How close they were from being enslaved? I'm not sure what the context of that is because I probably missed the most of the elders' hands. Yes. So, so again, the enslaved Africans were brought there because in those areas, it was the indigo, rice, and cotton. And this is from my conversation with Brother Lowe because my notes didn't go that far. So when Chief says he know a little bit about everything, is true. And I had some to contribute, but they were brought there to do the indigo. So you'll see a lot of the hands were stained blue, and indigo is poisonous. So this is what people were brought to that place to do, was to really work with these to be worked. And the other thing was rice. And so the key part for mentioning that is because when people talk about the experience of melanated people, they love to make this correlation and this pull from because when we was in the cotton, not everybody was doing cotton. Not everybody was doing cotton. A lot of people were, a lot of enslaved people were brought to the Geechee Gullah, islands for their skills in cultivating rice. There is literature on, the, I guess the skill or the art of rice or growing rice in West Africa and how that skill set, it wasn't just, they weren't just grabbing random people, as we know from the Sabbat call. They weren't just grabbing random people. Some people were stolen because they actually had skills in certain things. And so one of those skills was the cultivation of rice, and in that area. So it was indigo, it was rice, and there was cotton, but not everything is cotton. And I like to tell that, I do tobacco control. Some of us were picking tobacco leaves. So you have to think first they wanted you to pick it, now they want you to smoke it. So maybe you should quit. I just wanted to get that in there. But yeah, so not everything is about, picking cotton. There is, there are definitely a lot of different crops, right? Message. I'm sorry, it was a shameless plug. Yeah, a lot of, there were a lot of different crops that melanated people were brought here to cultivate, and that's not a mistake. When we think about films like Mandingo, and I'm not gonna go too into it because I don't know if this is gonna be a future film to be reviewed or to talk about the Innerstandings, but they kept meticulous records on who they were mating with who because they wanted to breed. That was a real thing. People breeded slaves to be a certain way, so they weren't just taking randoms from West Africa. They knew exactly who they were taking. And another thing about like the rice cultivation, when we think about, remember the Geechee Gullah Islands, they were, from South Carolina down to like Georgia. So when we think of that, there's Carolina rice, right? And so for years, I think like up until like 1974, like people thought like, oh, well, the Europeans that came to this, country like knew how to cultivate rice. No, they knew where to get people who knew how to cultivate and grow rice. And that was, only like revealed around like the 1970s with a book called Black Majority by Peter Wood. So there's lessons in everything. All right, so that concludes my review of Daughters of the Dust. Sister Sequoia said, y'all taking the word. I think that's in the chat. I am missing the chat. I'm going to have to go back and like read this. You also skipped the kiss that Sneed planted on Viola when he had a moment to return to his primitive sense. Oh, I did. Also, Trula was the only one who saw the unborn child. She crossed dimensions. Right. Yeah. Well, Mr. Sneed saw her too, but he saw her through a lens. He didn't see her with his own naked eye. He did see her through the lens of the camera. But yes, Trula was the only one that saw her while everyone else kind of sensed her presence. They kind of sensed her presence, that she was there. I wonder sometimes if Nana Pazant like saw her. Sovereign Eats says the historical residue of the indigo persists as they chose to use it to crown the unborn child's head. Yes. So blue. So the color blue, and indigo is, I guess, in the blue realm, or not, because I guess the rainbow is like blue and whatever. Yes, like blue is like very prominent color in this film. The child, the unnamed child, she has a blue ribbon in her head. Nana Pazant's dress is made, a lot of the clothing you see is like that indigo blue. Viola's dress, I think, is blue. It might be black because the film constitution is a little different. But blue is a key color, and we remember the film is Daughters of the Dust. That's why I use blue for the like preview thing. And blue is a feminine color, and so we wonder if the unnamed child, like maybe she's gonna come through as like a Yemoja energy. I'm not sure. Because remember, she's her mother's daughter, so she's probably and as she talks, you can kind of see she's probably going to be in that same cast or grouping as Nana Pazant and her mother, like that, that priestly kind of order. It says, Chief says she didn't need to see her. She stayed in that space. That was part of the science of her beginning in the cemetery. Nana Pazant. Okay. Right. Brother Antonio says the unborn child also approached Hagar. She was just looking at her like, all right, it's probably best that you go to. I don't know. But she did approach Hagar in the woods. But I don't think Hagar was even aware of her. She was probably one of the people that was not even aware of her presence, because Hagar was just in her own kind of, I'm doing this. Blue is the color of illusion, the unnamed. Yes. And you know what? There is a segment that it could be really helpful to watch when it comes to color. I think it's called Color Magic. I believe it's on this channel. enlightenment and transformation, but it's a really good one to watch. If someone can put it in the chat, because I don't have the link like offhand. Speaks to the child's inherent power, right? Okay, so that's all I have. I think right now, folks are just kind of in the chat, which is cool. My channel. I'm gonna see if I can like maybe go back and see some of the comments that I missed. Da, 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 da. Oh, great. All right. So, oh, thank you, Sister Kashia, for putting the link in there. Let me see. Okay, I think I might have caught most of them. The Wanga, thank you, because I was not clear on what the Wanga was. I caught that out of context. Right, the indigo in Nana's hand shows that she was still marked with her past. Yes. Oh, Sister Marie, Sister Minera. My grandparents are from South Carolina. Mine too. We ate plenty of rice in my day, and when I was introduced to jollof rice by the Nigerians, I was like, oh, I've been eating this type of rice all my life. See, it's kind of like it could be you know, when Brother Lowe mentioned 2 strongs ago about, you know, if you live in Chicago and like some of these northern cities, your people probably from the Carolinas. Well, if you come from, you know, some of the cities in the South, or, you know, your people probably from this part of West Africa, you know, just like we know that the people from Haiti come from the area of like Benin and Ghana, and they were, you know, a lot of them were from the Fon people. So like if you go back far enough and do some of that research and history, you can kind of find where, you know, where your last stop in West Africa might have been before you came here. Brother Antonio says, when my mother heard a Geechee woman speaking on the video, she was like, she sounds so much like a Bahamian. Oh, funny story about that. So funny. Earlier when Brother Laura and I were able to connect, we talked about how language is like a really big part of this film, and I was explaining like I actually had a little bit of a tough time. Like I had to rewind it a lot because there were some things that I just couldn't understand. And then I was speaking with another sister who also watched the film, and she is from the Caribbean, and she was like, she understands them. And it's interesting, they do sound, you know, very close to having a Caribbean accent. And but there's also like that, you know, southern United States kind of twang in there as well. And there were some things that I had trouble with, and I was sharing with Brother Lowe, like, you know, sometimes like when I was younger and I went south to visit like my mother's family, like there was some times where I needed like translation. And so that idea, and so in some ways I do have I'm like that Viola, like you know, we've been separated for so long, you either forget or you don't know, or you don't, you know, you don't want to go back. So that's like something to think about. Maybe that's another message. Some fun fact, the movie initially was a silent film. You know what, I could see that because the way it transitions is so like it didn't need words. Maybe I'll try watching it without the sound. It was a short, and then they redid it into what we got to see. It's really beautiful, like the landscaping, the scenery, and it's interesting. It was shared with me once that, you know, the reason why a lot of people like The Color Purple is because of the music. It was the music and something else. Maybe it was just the music. And I was thinking like, well, the music in this and the scenery is also quite beautiful. So I wonder, and I think I did look to see like when Color Purple came out. There's a difference. Like I think Color Purple was like early 80s, and this may have been like early 90s. So there's like a difference. But it's interesting how this film didn't necessarily get that same type of play, but I think we all know why that is. You know, the color purple gives a very specific message that fits into the programming. So of course that's the one that will get promoted. The way they talk in the film, minus the Caribbean flair where I'm from in North Carolina. The cinematography was amazing. Timthika says, I love growing up here on St. Helena. Oh, yes, that's one of the islands. Chief, you guys says, I am the first and the last. I am the silence that you cannot understand. I am the utterance of my name. When Nana said that, it meant whether they left the island or stayed, they were not separated. Brother LaCruz, sister, I can't really see the picture. Sorry, I'm nearsighted. In my college blacks in film class showed both films. It was very moving. My auntie spoke Geechee and she did not sound like a person from the islands. Okay. Brother Antonio says, is everyone here from South Carolina? Sister Tamika says, ancestors are deep here all our lives. The Precious Mom says, every moment of imagery was all encompassing. It was. It really was. I'm in North Carolina. Sister Kashia says, I saw that quote was as a woman being either the creator or destroyer of a family, life and death can be of her. She says Color Purple was only cinematography and music, very little dialogue. Right. Okay. All right. So I think I'm done for real. So if there are any other comments, please put them in the comments in the chat, you know, so that because there's when, you know, videos don't have to end. The video is still, you know, moving and alive, even though it's not technically live anymore. So, you know, definitely there's space in the comment section for people to continue the dialogue and sharing about the film. So I do encourage people to do that and share. And don't forget, and I know it was being said in the chat, but I'm gonna say it too: like, share, and subscribe. And also do that with some of the other channels, which you'll see in the video description. So with all of that being said, thank you everyone for joining us this evening for our movie Innerstandings with today's sub. My name is Deidre. I didn't say that. My name is Deidre. And thank you for joining us. And peace. Give thanks for everyone for joining and engaging in the chat. And we will see you in the forward. Peace.